Hi there guys, this lesson is on the basic system requirements. So basic system requirements for what, you may ask? Yes, you may ask. Okay, sorry, moving moving on. Right, so let me explain what that actually means. When we are purchasing software, okay, and you want to be able to use a particular kind of software on your computer, there will be somewhere on that software box or online a thing that says system requirements. System requirements. So what does that mean? Okay. Basically, your basic system requirements are as follows. The minimum hardware and OS requirements that need to be met to be able to install and run a particular program. I'll read that again, okay? The minimum hardware and operating system requirements that need to be met by you to be able to install and run a particular program. So let's look at that in terms of minimum versus recommended requirements, okay? Because most software developers will have a minimum requirements, but then they will also have recommended requirements. Let's see what the difference is, okay? So if we have a look in terms of a computer system, we've got the operating system and the software, and of course then we also have the hardware that's involved. So we're looking at this from all aspects, software and hardware. So stay with me here, guys, okay? In terms of operating system and software, well, the operating system will be Windows or Mac or Linux, depending on what it is you're working with. I'm going to just go with Windows on this one. And the program for today, I have chosen PS. Do you know what PS stands for? Photoshop. Yes, Photoshop. So we're going to install Photoshop on a computer. But before we can install Photoshop on a computer, we first need to know, do we meet the minimum system requirements in terms of the hardware? So let's have a look. In terms of hardware, we're going to have to look at a few things like the CPU. Will my CPU be fast enough? Is it powerful enough to run this program? Because this program is quite CPU intensive. Do I have enough memory in my computer? Do I have the right amount of RAM in order to run this program? Do I have enough storage space to install the program and work with it and create more files? That's another thing you've got to think of. Will my graphics support the requirements that Photoshop needs, or do I need another graphics card with more power? And what kind of screen resolution or screen size do I need in order to work with this? Okay, so minimum recommended. So the software developers will always give you two recommendations. The minimum basically means, okay, a basic installation is supported, all right? That means that it's probably going to be slow on your computer. It's not going to run at an optimum level, which is unfortunate for you, and it could also potentially freeze when you're trying to do something, because you're just trying to do something that your computer just cannot cope with, because you might not have enough RAM, or the processor's not fast enough, or you just don't have enough space on your hard drive, all those sort of things. What the developers will say is, okay, here are the recommended specs, okay, for your computer. That means that if you are going to meet the recommended setup, that it's running at the developer's recommendations, because they know what the program needs to run really well. You're going to be running the software at an optimum level of operation, so everything is going to be really cool, and it has all the bells and whistles, all right? All the extra features and the plugins that you need and the bits and pieces that you can add to the program, or just everything it can do, it will be able to do, because you have met the recommended requirements and not just the bare minimum to just maybe launch the program and work with it. All right, let's have a look at that in reality in terms of Adobe Creative Cloud. Have you guys ever heard of Adobe Creative Cloud? Adobe Creative Cloud is basically a collection of over 20 different desktop and mobile applications and services for photography, design, video, web, user experience and interface, and a lot more as well. They really are a fantastic company with a lot of amazing products. So we're going to look at one of the most famous, well-known products that has been around for many years, Adobe Photoshop. So now, if we were going to put Adobe Photoshop onto a computer, here from their website, here you can see that is a list of all the specifications that you should meet in terms of a minimum or a recommended setup. Okay, so let's have a look at each one at a time. Okay, so processor, your processor on your computer, the minimum and recommended. Okay, so they don't specify two different processors, an Intel or AMD processor, 64-bit, 2 gigahertz or faster. Okay, so that's kind of what they're saying. Next, the operating system, again, just not minimum or recommended, it's just this is what we need. Okay, it's Windows 10, also 64-bit, and then they give a Windows version number or later. Okay, so that's important. There's obviously a reason for that. If you had a much earlier version, it may not support certain functioning of the program. RAM, here we start seeing minimum recommended here. Okay, so the minimum amount of RAM that they would say is 8 gigabytes of RAM. So if you've got less than 8 gigs, don't even bother with this program. They do, however, recommend, if you really want to get the best out of this and enjoy using it, go with 16 gigabytes of RAM. Graphics card, right, let's see. Excuse me, guys. A GPU with DirectX 12 support, 2 gigabytes of GPU memory. Okay, remember GPU, graphical processing unit. Most graphics cards come with their own little cooling fan and their processors and a bit of RAM, their own RAM as well. So that's important to know. GPU with DirectX 12, I'm looking at recommended here. 4 gigabytes of GPU for 4K displays and greater. So there you can see we've got a minimum of 2 gigabytes and a recommended of 4 gigabytes of memory for your graphical processing unit. In terms of monitors, okay, so your minimum monitor is actually a 1280 by 800 display. That's quite interesting because that's pretty big actually, but they say you should have at least 1920 by 1080. Okay, like that's what you should have if you really want to work with this program. Hard disk space on your hard drive, 4 gigabytes of available hard disk space, and then of course additional space for any other stuff that you might add onto it. They, however, in the recommended section say 4 gigabytes of hard disk space, additional space for installation, but they also say a fast internal SSD and a separate internal drive for scratch disks. Scratch disks is like a temporary working space for Photoshop, okay? So you actually really do need a lot more than just 4 gigs of free space, all right? And then minimum and recommended, both of them, internet and connectivity for licensing and all the rest. So there you go. Guys, when you are going to install software on your computer, you need to check that your hardware is going to meet at least the minimum requirements so that you can run that program and you can use the program. It might be a bit slow and a bit laggy, but if you're on the minimum, recommended, however, would be better because then you are running at a much easier, faster pace and you can then enjoy using the program.